folks, welcome back to CGC Sawmill. Today we're going to try to do something a little different. We're going to take a look at the mill. I've been having some issues with some shaking with it. Typically with the really hard woods like the ashes, I will get that as soon as the blade gets dull, and that's expected. If you push too hard with a really dense wood, you will get some shaking with this. Just it's a home use mill. It's my HM 130 Max. It's a good mill. I've been able to cut a lot of wood with it, but today I'd like to figure out a little bit more about the shaking that goes on. My last episode I was cutting some pine and I was getting a lot of shaking, and I typically don't get that with the pine, and the blade wasn't all that dull, wasn't the sharpest of sharp blades. I still have that blade on here, and it still feels decently sharp. There are these little bushings right here that clamp onto this post to help keep it from shaking. You can see on both sides I have some gap on both sides, but on the ends it's tight, so I do need to probably adjust those bushings on all four of them, or maybe replace them. So what we're going to do today is, I've got all these logs here. They're pine. In the last episode I cut those down and brought them in with the log hauler, which was pretty interesting, especially this large one here. This is 28 inches. Bringing it in from the woods was just about maxed out my capacity with what I have. So be interesting to, when you get this big one on the mill, it's going to be interesting too, because I've done some 30 inchers on this mill, and turning them, rotating them can be pretty difficult. So when we get to that, we'll maybe do an episode on turning that and cutting that up. But for today, we're going to roll one of these guys on there. We're going to start cutting it, and we're going to see if we still get that shaking. If we still get that shaking, the typical culprit is a dull blade. I do have a sharp blade hanging there. Now these are all resharps, right? So I'm sharpening them myself, so I'm sure once in a while I just don't get them as sharp as they should be. So that could also be a culprit, but typically you can feel them with the edge of your finger. You can feel that they're sharp or dull. And so what we'll do first is, if we get that shaking, we'll put on a new blade and see if we still get the shaking, to see if that is the main culprit. I think that is the main culprit, but I could help myself out by tightening those bushings as well. So maybe we'll go through and we will tighten those bushings as well. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take the pups for a run. We're going to take the hounds for a run through the woods. So we'll go through that first, and then we'll get back to doing some milling here and figuring out why this mill is shaking. Hey. Go ahead. the water. Get the mud off. In the water, Blue. Get the mud off. Water's a little cold. Ice is just coming off for a second time. Okay, I took a little time out here. This Schedule 40 PVC, I ended up putting some holes in the top and putting a screw up above, so all I have to do, I don't have to chase these down. I can just hang them up there, and when I need them, I just bring them down right here and pop them on there. Okay, I've made a couple cuts and you can see the head is shaking slightly. while I'm cutting. I am pushing really hard. I'm driving it in. I just wanted to see how sharp that blade is. It's kind of a feel. I can feel that that blade's cutting good, and it actually shows too, right? Because there is no waviness to the boards. It's nice and flat. Even when I'm hitting these knots, I'm not seeing there's no waviness to the blade. Usually a lot of times when you have a dull blade and you hit a knot, it'll want to ride up over it or ride under it, and you'll see a little bit of a wave there. I'm not seeing that at all. So that blade feels sharp. It is running sharp. I'm thinking that I spent a lot of time cutting a bunch of ash wood, which is really hard wood, and I think I may have gotten those bushings that are in here. Just from cutting that, it wants to shake a lot, and I think what I've done is I've loosened these bushings up. I've allowed them to slide out a little bit, so I'm not clamped on to this rail with this head, right? Because this head is sitting just on this rail, right? So it's has this piece here is connected to the head, and that just sits on this rail, right? And you have these cables that pull this head up and down. There's cables on both sides that lift the head up and down on this rail right here. These bushings are what make the contact between the head and the main frame. So if these bushings are loose, you'll have issues with it shaking. So I'm thinking the first thing actually this time what I'm going to do is I am going to tighten all these bushings and see if that solves the problem. Okay, I'm not sure if there's enough lighting in here, but as you can see, what I did is I loosened the 4 bolts that are around it, and then I clamped and squeezed in so that those bushings were touching the rail, and then I tightened them back up. So what I'm going to do is go around to each one of these posts. We have a bushing on the top of each of the posts and at the bottom of each of the posts. So I'll go through that process of tightening each of those up, and then we'll hit the wood again with the mill and see if we get shaking. Okay, those bottom ones are a little tough to get to, especially on this side. Looks like the other side might be a little easier. Just this here, you got to be able to get in here. And the same on the other side over here. You're not going to get much of a turn. You get 1/8 of a turn on them, on those, once you get your wrench in there. So that one's done too. We loosened it up, squeezed that one in, and tightened it back up. We just got to do the other two. Okay, that took about 15 minutes to loosen these up, clamp those bushings tighter, and then tighten everything up. You can see I definitely don't have any gaps. Those bushings are on there now. Now will be the question, how easy will it slide up and down? I do occasionally put some silicone spray on these to make sure they slide easier. I think I put some on not long ago. I don't know. I don't have the spray out here right now because of the cold weather, so I'd have to run back to the house and get it. But we'll see how this slides up and down. I imagine I do have some bushings back at the house that I could replace all of these bushings. So once they wear out, you need to replace them. So I can see I'm getting pretty tight on some of these sides, so I may have to replace them next time. So as you can see, all 4 of them have been squeezed in. We'll see how this head raises up and down. See if we feel any difference. Definitely feel a little tighter You can hear the squeaking a little bit more as I raise it up and down. Definitely, if you can listen, you can hear those bushings rubbing on that rail, which I imagine you want them rubbing on the rail. Maybe I'll run up to the house and get a little silicone spray and put on there before we get started with this next one. Okay, this is just some blaster silicone lubricant. So what I did is I applied it to the rails on the top here after moving the head down a little ways on both sides, and then I raised the head up, and then I applied it to the bottom side and slid these down. Still it's doing some squeaking, but it should help with the movement up and down. So you definitely can't over tighten those bearings, or those bushings. Yeah, definitely, I wouldn't crank on those bushings into the rail as hard as you can, just because now you're not going to be able to slide up and down. So you got to be able to slide up and down and keep the head from shaking. We'll see. We'll give it a cut right now on this log and see if we see any difference. Okay, I would say that was a definite improvement. I still have a slight little bit of shaking there, but I was going through that, especially this last one here. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 2x8s, and I cut them into 2x4s, so I went through that pretty fast and didn't get much shake. So that definitely tightening up those bushings will help with that shake. I think some of it is contributed to the blade, amount of lubricant. I'm not sure totally. It might be that I need to replace those bushings with new ones as well. So I'm going to plop another log on here. I'm going to change out the blade and let's see how she cuts. Okay, that was with the blade change and the tightening of the bushings both done, and it was a pretty good cut in there, and I didn't feel any shaking on that one. So Maybe it's just a combination of the two. I don't think that blade right there that I just put on is super sharp. I tell you, when I get them right off the sharpener and then I run them, then they're sharp. They set for a week or so. They're undercover over here, and I oil them up. But just sitting out in that weather, I guess they just dull. Even the new ones that I get, I usually have to sharpen those. They're not very sharp when I get them. So I usually put a little edge on them before I'll run them, and then I'll realize, well, I need to sharpen that because it's been sitting around too long. I'm not sure if those edges just dull over time or what, but maybe it's just the steel or something. But yeah, that cut pretty good between the combination of those two, a new blade and tightening up those bushings seemed to fix that. We'll finish this, we'll run through this log. We're going to make some 2x8s out of this 12-foot long. Okay, Woodland Mills guys, so if you're having problems with shaking, what I found today, you know, there's always different circumstances, is that I tightened up my bushings and I changed out my blade and that shake went away. You know, I can't explain it always all the time. Sometimes, you know, if I'm really hitting some hardwood like some ash, I don't think you're going to prevent that shaking, but maybe me cutting a lot of ash lately caused my bushings to start to wear and to start to loosen. So that might have been the problem the other day when I was cutting a bunch of pine. You know, that's why I was getting so much shaking, just those bushings weren't tight and I didn't have the sharpest of blades. Which typically with pine trees, your white pine, you don't need a super sharp blade. It usually cuts pretty good. You can see I'm not, if you look on these, and when you hit a knot, you'll usually go up or down. You can see there's a knot there. There's no waviness in that cut at all. It's nice flat cut all the way down the board. So out of this last, I think this was 12'6", so I made some 2x8s out of this. So I got 3 there and 3 there, so I got 6 2x8s out of that. And then I have 2 pieces of 1x left over that I'm going to get some good easy 1x6s out of it, 12-foot long. So I think that's going to wrap it up for today. I'm a little under the weather. Had a cold lately, so looks like the next log is that big guy. Those are fun to turn, let me tell you. I've done a couple of them. They're not fun to turn on the mill. So a lot of times you shape them down as far as you can before you do your first flop. And I may not be able to do a 90 flop. We'll see when I get to that guy. It'll probably be on the next episode. It's supposed to get way below freezing tonight. So I gotta drain this tank out, and I'll just put a little bit of windshield washer fluid in there. I like to use water while I'm cutting that instead of windshield washer fluid. So, but I do like to put that in just a little bit in the tank, and I run it into my line and down into this valve right here. Keep that from freezing up. I appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully we can get some more people commenting on the stuff I'm doing here. You know, they may have some good advice for me. You know, I may be doing something wrong. I'm not always great at reading all the manuals on the equipment. A lot of times I just figure it out for myself. I put it together and see how it goes together. There might be something on these bushings that I don't know that somebody could tell me. But yeah, I love to see some comments, and give me a like and a subscribe. I appreciate you guys for watching. Thanks. Have a good day.